YouTube, how are we? Welcome back to the road to 24. Today I'm going to be taking you through another full workout session. We're going to be doing a little bit of a different one today. We've got my posterior session. So this is something that I have incorporated in order to make my split, kind of the volume of it and the layout of it, just the easiest for my schedule, my routine. So posterior might not be a term that you've necessarily heard before in terms of a split. If I'm honest with you, it's essentially just a combination of legs and pull. It's obviously got a very, very heavy emphasis on the back of the body. There is also a little bit of biceps thrown in there as well, but for the majority of this it's posterior. So I apologise once again if you can hear the fan in the background. If you're in the UK, you know it's absolutely boiling right now. This session has been adapted to fit the studio that I'm in so that I can film this video for you. This would typically be a session that I would actually do in another bigger gym that I train at. But obviously in order to film it for you all, I'm going to go through it here today in the studio. So there are some kind of adaptations, modifications, but I'll go through those as we go through them. Unfortunately, there's also another thing that I've had to take into consideration. So I've actually really hurt my ankle. I had a bit of a freak accident a few weeks ago and missed some stairs that I was walking down. Basically just landed completely free fall on the side of my ankle, and I've ended up with a grade 2 sprain, so there's a bit of a tear in there. So I'm 3 weeks, just over 3 weeks in fact, into the recovery of that, and it's getting a lot better. But typically grade 2 sprains have a recovery period of about 6 to 8 weeks, so still got a little bit to go. Been rehabbing it every day, making sure I'm staying on top of it, but again, because of that, there's some things that I just have to modify and really regress. So we're working through that. It's a challenge, but keep on going. Excited to get into this session. Going to finish my pre-workout and then we'll hop into it. Okay, so what you've just seen is me just going through a little bit of warm-up work, activation work, whatever you want to class it as, essentially a warm-up, mimicking some of the movements that we'll be going through in the session. This has been made a little bit more tricky with the ankle situation. My favourite thing to do prior to going into any kind of leg-based work is just to do some split squats with some added like hip flexion. By bringing my leg up at the top of each rep. So essentially, I suppose, a reverse lunge with added hip flexion. Because of my ankle, it's not really been possible. So we've just done some back work, did some dynamic stuff for the legs. I've not done any kind of a heart rate raiser just because it's absolutely boiling. Just walking up the stairs and getting in here is enough of a heart rate raiser. So we're going to go through some warm-up sets of the first exercise, which is going to be a hamstring curl. So if I was in the other gym, this would be done on a line hamstring curl machine, but obviously we don't have that here, so we're going to be using a cable machine. You can actually mimic this fairly well on a cable machine. It's certainly not perfect, just because you do have a fairly limited range of motion, just because the cable sort of gets in the way on the eccentric portion. But as a general rule of thumb, I enjoy this exercise, and I've programmed it for clients that only have access to a cable machine, and also we were using this with bands over lockdown as well. So it's a decent exercise to add in if you don't have access to an actual hamstring curl machine. But if you do have access to a hamstring curl machine, obviously I'm always going to prefer that you use that. Just realised what a huge error I've made by wearing the Vibrams and not sort of like discussing them, because there are of course most likely gonna be comments on them. So these are Vibram 5 fingers. They're great for your feet. Most people hate them, most people stare at you, but you just sort of sit and feel warm inside knowing that you're going to have a great session in your barefoot shoes, and then we will move on and get on with our lives. So initially all I'm doing here is warm-up sets. So we'll start out with very, very lightweight for around about 10 reps, and we gradually work the weight up, gradually decrease the reps until we get to that first working set. Thinking about keeping my hips pushed down, nice and controlled. See what I mean about that range of motion? You can't get as much of it because the cable's in the way. There's nothing I can do about that. Keeping everything in place, nice and controlled. Treat your warm-up sets like your working sets. Not just in terms of the control, but in terms of the mentality as well. Don't just kind of be wishy-washy about it. Take them just as seriously as you would your top working sets. This is also a really good time as well to make sure that you've got your breathing in the right place as well, which I'm doing a very bad job of by talking to you guys. Okay, we've made it to the top set, or I should say the first working set of the day. So we're going to go in with the 1x12 to 15 before we go in with the 1x8 to 10. So this top set we are going to use to get as much out of that shortened range as we possibly can. So the shortened range for this exercise is the top part of that contraction. So when my knee is at around about 90 degrees worth of knee flexion. As soon as I start to fail in that range, I can't get my leg up that high, the set's over. And we're aiming to hit that within the 12 to 15 rep range. What we'll then do in the 8 to 10 set is take it to near enough all-out failure. We are only at the start of the workout, so I don't want to completely annihilate my legs, but we'll allow ourselves to fail slightly more in the lengthened part, which I'll show you all in a second. What you're going to see is that I'm going to hold it in the shortened range for 1 to 2 seconds worth of a pause as well, so I can really milk that shortened range. So what you saw me do there was 11 reps, so fell short of that 12 to 15 rep range there. It was sort of a stab in the dark in terms of weight, because obviously I don't normally train here, so I don't have any logbook numbers to follow. The other thing that I will say as well is that doing this on the cable machine doesn't provide any sort of a drop off. So obviously when I'm going into that shortened range, when my legs are moving up, so I'm going into that knee flexion, I'm getting weaker. But because we're doing it on the cable machine, that cable's actually getting further away from my knee joint. So it's actually getting heavier, so those two things don't match up. If I was to have done this, say for example, on the Lion hamstring curl machine at the gym that I train at, it's a Nautilus Nitro one, so there is actually a bit of a drop off there. So it makes getting into that shortened range a little bit easier, even when you start to fatigue, whereas here, you don't really get that. So what, and I haven't watched the footage back, but what you'll most likely have seen is that those last few reps I wasn't really getting into too much knee flexion. There's not a huge amount I can do about that, again, because this machine doesn't provide me with a drop off, so it's sort of something that I just sort of have to put up with. So we're going to do exactly the same on the left side, then we'll drop into a slightly heavier set for an 8 to 10. Okay, so I'm going to go into the second set here on the line hamstring curl. Put the weight up ever so slightly by just one stack. So this is the 8 to 10. So with this, the set will finish when I'm failing more so in the lengthened range. So there's going to come a point where I simply won't be able to get into this amount of knee flexion. That's fine, I'm still going to keep the set going until I'm failing around about this point just here. This isn't going to completely annihilate my hamstrings so that I won't have anything left for the rest of the session, but it's certainly going to be a lot more fatiguing than that first set. Okay, we're going to go into the first back exercise of the day. So we're actually only going to do one set here, because again, I'm just looking to train that shortened range as much as I can before I go into kind of like a bigger movement, i.e. for this session it's going to be an RDL. I want to try and get as much out of that shortened range as I can before it becomes fatigued in other lifts. So just one set here, chest supported single arm cable row. If you've been following me on Instagram for a while, or you've watched previous Road to 24s, I've been over this exercise a lot, so I apologise if you've heard me go over this one loads of times, but if you've not, then you're in for a treat with this one, because it is a brilliant exercise. It's just set up to absolute perfection, and because it's on the cable machine, it's also set up to fit me perfectly. So if you do it for yourself, it's all about making it set up for yourself perfectly. So we've got the chest support there for that added stability. I'm able to set the cable up so that I can get a diverging path of motion, so my elbow is going to finish wider than it started, but I'm also able to get a downward arc, so my elbow is finishing lower than it started. Both of those two things are what we're looking for when we're trying to train a lat-based row. From there, we're all good to go. So once you've got your setup all sorted and it's matching you, and ready to go. So again, 12 to 15 reps, set finishes once I'm failing in that shortened range.
More in the tank, let's go. More. One more.
Okay, we're going to do adduction. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The cable machine version of this, I suppose it's a little bit like the hamstring curl saga. Yes, you can do it on a cable machine. Is it as optimal as some machines? Probably not. But so if I was in the big gym, I'd just simply be using an adduction machine for this. To set it up on a cable machine, the one thing that I would say is it becomes a lot easier if you've got somebody to help you. Because in order to make this setup as optimal as possible, you're going to want some sort of counter resistance, because this machine is going to want to pull me in the direction of the cable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie a belt around myself to give me that counter resistance, to stop me from being pulled that way. So it gives me some stability. Because there's just so much going on, like I say, it's great to be able to do this with clients because I can put the belt on them and they can sort out the cable, whereas obviously with myself I've got to do both. So it does make it a little bit tricky. So because of that, I'm not going to go too heavy. I'm going to do 2 sets of around about 12 to 15 reps. That way, I've trained adductors, you've seen that I've trained them, but this wouldn't typically be how I'd do it. I'd do a 1 set of 12 to 15 and then a 1 set of 8 to 10. But it will do for the day. So if you want to give this a go, by all means go for it. I'll show you the setup of it, but it is definitely a lot easier if you've got somebody to help you. Okay, so I've got my ankle strap on. On the foot that isn't lifting, I'm going to be standing on a plate so that I'm not dragging my foot along the floor, so it's got a bit of height on it. I'm now in the position to be able to get my belt on. Or dip belt as opposed to just give me counter resistance so that I'm not being pulled in one direction. Okay, so we're going to move on to dumbbell RDLs. So obviously this is the biggest change within my program since the accident with my ankle. So these were barbell RDLs. We were doing some lovely triple figure barbell RDLs. Everything was progressing nicely. And now we're doing dumbbell RDLs. And it's very, very light. Very light. I'm basically just trying to go through the movement pattern without any pain. That's essentially the goal. It is still so early on in my recovery that just going through the movement without any pain and slowly adding on load is the goal, whether I like it or not. So the triple figure RDLs are going to have to wait a little bit. Because today we're doing some boring light dumbbell RDLs, but even still we give it our all. And one thing that I will say is that injuries are very, very humbling, and they make you appreciate the small steps. So actually going from not being able to walk properly to being able to go through just a body weight deadlift, or like a body weight remaining deadlift, it was amazing. Like, it filled me with so much happiness. So it is sort of just about appreciating the small steps. So let's get into it. Can't promise it will be hugely interesting, but we'll do it anyway. On my ankles to help with recovery. To be honest, the main reason that I've switched to dumbbell as opposed to barbell is just because there's not so much of a walkout, and therefore there's not as much risk of me rolling on my ankle, because obviously at the minute stability in the ankle is a bit of an issue. So at least with this there's not as much of a walkout. So we're just going to go for a nice 8 reps. All I'm going to do today in terms of RDL is going to do another set of that, but in terms of the weight and the reps, that's what I'm going to do. That's the heaviest I've gone since I hurt my ankle, so that's a big step already. That's 30 kilos, and like I say, it's still very, very early days. The last thing I want to do is overload it. We just want enough of a load there each week progressively in order to create that adaptation. Keep that movement pattern ingrained, but also help my ankle to strengthen back up. That's all I can do at the minute. So rear delts is probably another one that I covered in one of the previous Road to 24s. just because it's something that I'll do on a pull day, and I know that I've been able to pull. But I'll go for it again, just for those that are new. So rear delts are typically very poorly trained. Most people kind of pick poor movement patterns or pick too much weight or both normally. And I've been victim of this myself. I kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm not actually feeling my rear delts here. And it's not the be all and end all, like mindful connection isn't the be all and end all, but it is a pretty big chunk of the pie. And to not have been feeling them kind of became a big red light to me. And it was just going straight through my traps, as it is with most people, or a lot of people. So what I like to do is a chest supported cable rear delt row. So this is a dual cable, and we're going to cross over with the cables, and this is going to create a nice drop off as we get weaker, so that way it's going to drop off slightly. So if you're somebody who is currently training rear delts by kind of doing bent over, maybe dumbbell flies and throwing a load of weight around, or maybe you're doing like some standing reverse cable flies, again throwing weight around, maybe just give this exercise a go. Drop the weight down, 12 to 15 reps, a little bit of a pause in that shortened position, squeezing those shoulder blades together, and see what sort of a feeling you can get out of it. Okay, so we're going to get into some bicep work. We are just doing 2 sets of biceps today, just a little bit to tag on. I'm taking the biceps here through work that's sort of emphasising more that shortened range, so when we're in that contraction period. On other days, what I'll also do is go through some work where we're sort of prioritising that lengthened portion, so actually starting in this position on the cable machine and then curling up from there. Obviously, because arms out in front of us, we've kind of bypassed that extra extension, if you will, and we're just focusing on this top portion here. In order to really emphasise that, we're going to hold it for a second in that contracted phase. So we're going to do it preacher style, so we're going to have arm out in front of me. That cable is going to be pulling directly through my elbow in that starting point, and then we'll create some rotational challenge as we go through the exercise. So we can do 12 each side. Again, one that I've actually been through on here before, and you've probably seen me do on Instagram if you follow me over there. So we're going to go in with first tricep exercise of the day. So we're going to do a dual cable push down. This is crossover. The reasoning behind this is just that we can create a nice drop off, so as we push through and get weaker, that cable is actually going to get closer to your elbow, so it's going to drop off, get a little bit lighter. Like I say, this is the first of 2 tricep exercises that we're going to do. If I was at the bigger gym, I would still be doing this one. It's the next exercise that you'll see that I've adapted to fit the cable machine. Actually the same with the bicep curls that you just saw me do. I would still actually go to the trouble of setting up the cable machine in order to create that exercise even at the bigger gym where there's actually like machine seated bicep curls. Even though those exercises or those machines could most likely offer me a drop-off, I've never actually been over those exercises or those machines and gone through it, but it's things like Nautilus, so I'm sure they do somewhere in there. But the reason that I like to do it on here is because with the D handle I'm able to create some natural rotation in the wrist at the bottom of the exercise, so I can curl up as I come through. On the machine you're locked into your wrists are locked into a position they don't necessarily want to be locked into, and it's just not something that feels comfortable on my wrists. It shouldn't really be nice on anybody's wrists, but particularly mine, having had wrist troubles in the past. So most of the time actually, even when I'm surrounded by tons and tons of machines and whatnot, you'll actually find me creating a lot on the cable machine because I can really make it fit myself. Okay, we've made it to the home stretch. Last exercise. Going to finish off with a tricep finisher. So, like I say, this is a bit of a remake. I don't even really know if it can class as a remake, to be honest. But it's going to be in place of a tricep extension machine. So I've been using, there's 2 different ones, or 2 different brands at the gym that I go to, either the Nautilus Nitro one, or I think it's a hammer strength one, don't know the exact model. So basically where you've got your elbow up on the pad and then you're extending from the elbow from behind. I'm still sort of getting to grips with that machine a little bit. I'm not 100% sure that I love it yet, but I keep on giving it a go. But obviously don't have that here. So I'm going to do sort of a cable version. So we've got the cable coming in from behind us, using the bench as a position to push against. In order to do this, a little bit like the adduction, we're going to need some sort of a counter resistance, because obviously this cable is wanting to pull my shoulder up and off this bench. Now, I'm going to use a resistance band for this. Don't know how effective it's going to be, and it's also going to probably be a little bit difficult to get into. If I was doing this with a client, what I would actually do is either use a resistance band or something like a daisy chain, but also kind of tighten it with my hand myself, not to the point where I'm restricting the client's blood flow, but in order to get a decent amount of resistance. I don't know if that's going to achieve this just by myself, but we'll give it a go. So we're literally just going to finish the triceps off, 1 set each side of 15 reps. complete. So that is my posterior and biceps session. Hopefully that was something that you enjoyed. If it was, please give it a like. If you're not already subscribed, please do. And obviously any questions about today's session, drop it in the comments section down below and I'll get back to you. And as always, I'll see you all in the next one.